Welcome into the Big Little Podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. The round of 64 is just about concluded, so we're already looking ahead. But before we do that, we're going to talk about the games that have already gone from start to finish. The round of 64, big recap. What is some of the biggest storylines that you've seen from the first 2 days of March Madness?
Yeah, I'm excited to be back. March Madness has been a lot of fun so far, and there's been a couple storylines, maybe not as many as your typical March Madness. I feel like this has been one of the more predictable ones. Everyone's kind of saying there hasn't been really a 1-2 upset yet that we've seen, at least at the time of this recording. And there's always a team that falls kind of a little bit early, and that team this year, unfortunately for us too, was Clemson. McNeese took it home, just barely beating Clemson in the round of 64. And I think that's definitely the biggest storyline to come out of this year's March Madness, at least so far. Obviously, leading into the conference tournament and into just March Madness in general. Their student manager, Amir Ora Khan, if you want to give that to him as his middle name, was one of the bigger storylines. He's the first student manager to ever sign an NIL deal and make that three, actually pick Buffalo Wild Wings and another like really big sponsor that he has kind of just all over his boombox, if you want to call it that. So that was a really big storyline. Obviously, a lot of people picked McNeese for solely that reason. No, like if you ask a lot of people to name more than 2 or 3 McNeese players, they couldn't, but everyone knows Amir Ora Khan, if you want to call him that. I wasn't too high on them, and I think for good reason. They're not the most fun team to watch. They played a really scrappy game and forced Clemson into 11 turnovers and only 13 points in the first half of that game. But I think Clemson really showed, besides the fact that like the going away from the storyline a little bit with McNeese, Clemson showed that they were the better team late in that game. With 8 minutes left to go in that game, they outscored McNeese 38-18. And if they could have put together any stretch like that during the first half, they easily would have won that game. It's just really unfortunate that they came out so slow to start. Literally, they had only 2 more points than turnovers in the first half. It was just kind of upsetting to watch somebody who had them in the Elite Eight, because they are so much better than what they played like. And I mean, congrats to McNeese. But I have another hot take coming out of this. I'm not a big fan of Cinderellas. Like, I like 1 or 2 or like a couple that like can kind of just like go through the round of 64. But that year where we had like a bunch that was kept on falling, eventually that the Cinderellas aren't going to make it as far in the tournament. And then as the later rounds progress, there's less and less games. And then the less and less games, the quality, I feel like, decreases a little bit when there's Cinderellas, because it feels like the Cinderellas always end up getting blown out towards the end of the season. So I mean, it's always a fun story, but if they make it past the Sweet 16, I'm a little bit upset. So the fact that there haven't been as many upsets this year, I'm not all that mad.
Yeah, that's actually a really good take. I've heard some people say that in years past, where it's like, oh, this team, because there are Cinderellas that do make it fairly far to the Elite Eight or to the Final Four. Even we've seen that in recent years where they do actually end up getting some wins under their belt that's further than the Sweet 16. And yeah, you're hoping that these games aren't blowouts, and then you get one and you're like, oh man, well, there's nothing else that I can watch. You can't just turn the TV and watch something else, right? So not like the earlier rounds. So I completely get you on that. Going back to the McNeese State game, it's very interesting that that's the main upset that we've seen so far, I would say, right? That there hasn't been a 13-4 upset, even though I believe Texas A&M got a little bit of a game from UNC Wilmington, and they shot 46 3-pointers, which I believe was the most for them ever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. Clemson, if they didn't have such a terrible first half, one of the worst first halves that we've ever seen, really, probably in the tournament, from a competitive seed, and also at the same time, probably the worst that team has ever played, or all year together. And so they're definitely kicking themselves. You mentioned that they outscored them 38-16 in the last 8 minutes. They scored 54 points in the second half. And when you go from 13 to 54, that's when you know something was going on in that first half, that you kind of partially do have to give it up to McNeese State, though, too, right? Because you don't that doesn't just happen on one side of the ball. But certainly that the Clemson team was good, and it's unfortunate that they played their worst half of basketball in the first round of March Madness. Another thing I wanted to bring up was, I think we were kind of dead wrong about UNC. I had them going a little bit further than I think you did. Did you have them losing to Ole Miss in the first round?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, okay. Hey, there's so many brackets, bro. So I don't. You fill out some more brackets than I do, but I had UNC going a little further. I was buying it. I was thinking that they were going to show the world that they belonged. that they were going to do this, that, and the other after their huge win a few nights ago, and they just came out flat against Ole Miss. That game wasn't even close, and then got kind of the final score kind of got a little bit close, but yeah, UNC just kind of shattered my heart a little bit there too.
Yeah, I mean they cut it to one possession with like 2 minutes left. That the RJ the game was relatively close towards the end. It had me as somebody who was rooting for Ole Miss a little bit scared, but I mean for the majority of that game shouldn't have been in doubt and wasn't in doubt. I think there was a stat that came out during one of the broadcasts. I forgot which one, but I think it was during the Clemson game that no team had ever come back like since 1990. Teams were like 200 and like 0 when they'd been leading at halftime by more than 15 points, and that was the case for the Ole Miss game too. It definitely came down to the wire, but like for the majority of that game, it just felt like it was out of hand and out of hand just because like UNC was just shooting terribly for an extended period of time. Like it felt like they made a bunch of runs and then just chucked up shots with 20 seconds on the shot clock with like threes that like, didn't need to be taken and they weren't making them. UNC easily could have like came back and won that game. I was kind of thankful that they didn't because of like the amount of brackets that I did have with Ole Miss winning that game. But I mean, I respect the fact that they at least put up a fight towards then and didn't decide to kind of just phone it in.
So another game that I chose as an upset that was incorrect was High Point over Purdue. Just figured Purdue coming in 3-6 over the last 9 games. High Point maybe has some sort of Cinderella storyline that you could see waking up and on the news. I thought that was a perfect kind of storm for them to win. Also, Yale just wasn't able to handle Texas A&M. At certain points, they ended up losing by 9. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about the 13-4s just kind of coming up empty in this tournament.
I think that throughout the tournament, a lot of like the experts were saying that the top seeds were like really good this year, and I think that a lot of them proved that. Obviously, there were some closer games in here, but a lot of especially the 1-2 matchups, they haven't been all that close. Besides maybe the Alabama Robert Morris game, and even that game, it never really felt like Alabama was in trouble. I don't think they trailed during that game, so just the wide. Yeah.
Robert Morris took the lead with 8 minutes to go, but after that, it was just straight all Alabama. I think they maybe had one lead that entire game.
Yeah. So just the overarching theme of this March Madness is just that the top seeds are really good this year. And even with Alabama struggling, like Robert Morris probably played the game of their life and they weren't able to pull it out. Alabama does what they do. They score a lot of points and they're going to be tough to beat no matter what round. So I think that's just the overarching theme for me. I'm not really taking much else from those games. Just the fact that like the top seeds are really good this year. Obviously Texas A&M got like, it was a game, and there was some other games that like have been close, but it just doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like the Cinderellas are really like taking it to any of the top seeds this year. At least not in my opinion.
Yeah, they're not really out this year as they have been in the past, but there are still a handful of games, as we mentioned earlier, that are still to be left to played. UConn, Oklahoma, that's 8-9 matchup. Xavier, Illinois, 11-6. Bryant, Michigan State, that's the 15-2 that maybe some people are keeping an eye on. Others are buying Tom Izzo, saying he's going to bring them back. And then Liberty, Oregon, which I actually have Liberty in that game, but for any specific reason, don't ask me why. But that could be a 12-5 matchup that we end the night with that could end up giving us another upset. Is there anything that you're looking from those games that you might pinpoint for a lower seed to win?
I like the Liberty matchup a little bit. I have Oregon personally advancing, but that Liberty team is a good team. Again, don't ask me why.
Yeah.
They're in the tournament. They're anything can happen. I mean, I had Utah State beating UCLA in the nightcap yesterday. I wanted that to happen. They absolutely got crushed. So I mean, it would just be nice to, if nothing else, it would just be nice to see like somebody else kind of come out, like one of the double digit seeds come out of this first round. Like I just said that I'm not a big fan of Cinderellas, but I mean one or like a couple more wouldn't hurt anybody.
Yeah, so I think that there's a lot of people who kind of they want answers whenever the round of 64 is like this. When there's maybe we could be done with this and the lowest seed that advances is the 12-5 matchups and it's the 12 seeds. They want answers. Is it NIL? Is it like anything else? Or was there any contributing factors to it? I think it's just year to year, it's so different. And you kind of have to balance out the percentages too, right? Like the 13 or the 14 or the 15 seeds can't always go to the Sweet 16. Like it's not always going to happen. And sometimes you get a little bit of a rude wake-up call, but then a 9 seed goes all the way to the Final Four. And then now we're talking about a different like type of Cinderella, maybe a dark horse like we talked about in the March Madness special, right, where we were choosing a lower seed who maybe isn't a Cinderella to go even further in the tournament.
Yeah, just as a general recap thing, I wanted to go back to the last episode where I did kind of my upset picks and went out and just said I gave one and then said Clemson and like on the opposite end where I was saying like upsets that won't happen. McNeese, I said wouldn't beat Clemson, which is just a little unfortunate because I went out and said that for no reason. But on the opposite end of that, I said that Colorado State was going to beat Memphis, and they really, I feel towards the second half, they really took it to Memphis. Like they were out rebounding them on the offensive and defensive boards. Like everything just kind of was going Colorado State's like way in the second half. After trailing in the first half, they just really it was a lot of fun to watch somebody who like kind of called that upset. Colorado State was also favored, and they've won 11 straight now. So I mean, props to them, and I'm looking forward to what they're going to do against Maryland next round.
And also, there's an art to staying off of an upset like that because there were a lot of people who were picking Colorado State, just as in maybe every 12-5 matchup gets kind of debated whenever it comes March. But we stayed off of the UC San Diego and Michigan upset, and that kind of proved to be right as well. So at least we got something right in the round of 64. Let's go to the round of 32 preview. You can mention what you were maybe just about to say too in this if it aligns. I was going to ask you, what is a lower seed that you trust the most?
Again, not really a huge upset. I feel like a lot of I'm kind of trying to stay off them the way the tournament's going so far. But BYU over Wisconsin is something that I really like. I mean, it's a 6-3 matchup again, not too crazy, but Wisconsin's coming off of going to the Big Ten tournament, so they're Big Ten final, like Big Ten tournament final. They're playing really good basketball, but I just really like this BYU team. They've won 10 of their last 11. They're just a team full of shooters. You saw that against a VCU team that was highly touted as one of those teams that could be an upset pick because of the fact that they played really good defense. And BYU kind of just took it to them. VCU never really felt like they were in that game. I know a lot of people had that upset. And it's because BYU has a ton of shooters. I mentioned this in the preview to this. They had 6 guys who play 15 or more minutes that shoot over 35% from the three. They average 80 points a game, and their leading scorer only averages 16 points a game. So just a lot of guys that, like, if their best guy isn't having the greatest game in the world, if Richie Saunders isn't going off for 20 points, he doesn't need to. He averages 16 points a game, and they're still a really good team. They've won 10 of their last 11. Obviously, a Wisconsin team that's really hot too, but I feel like this Wisconsin team is a little bit more top heavy in their scores. John Blackwell and John Tonje, obviously we mentioned them in the Big Ten. Like in my Big Ten pick is the reason why I had them going all the way in the Big Ten tournament, which eventually didn't happen. But just through that run, you saw John Tonje and John Blackwell have really good Big Ten tournaments, and all season they've been playing really well. But if they're not playing well, it feels like their offense can stagnate a little bit, which is why they ended up losing that Big Ten tournament to Michigan because of the fact that John Tonje didn't have his greatest game. John Blackwell kind of tried to carry them, but it just didn't work. And if those two aren't clicking on all cylinders, it feels like they can be had a little bit. So in a 6-3 matchup, I really like a BYU team that is pretty deep. They have 9 guys who play 15 or more minutes. They have a really good shooters on that team. It's a deep team. I think that if there's a matchup that I really like in this next round, BYU beat in Wisconsin could be a good one.
Yeah, that's a really good pick. I was extremely impressed with the way that BYU played in the first round against VCU. I had a lot of respect for VCU. I know my bracket is all messed up because of that loss, but at the same time, you have a feeling for some teams you're going to pick. VCU was that team for me, and BYU they were just so smooth on offense, and I think they can really win this Wisconsin game. My pick would actually have to be just right in the same bracket. The 2 teams that are supposed to meet after this, the BYU Wisconsin game at St. Mary's, Alabama. I have confidence in St. Mary's. They came back in the recent game against Vanderbilt, and I just think when a team rallies and they can bring that momentum into the next game, that serves them very well. I felt like Alabama was good in the game against Robert Morris, but as I mentioned, they did give up a lead. And there were parts of that game where I felt like Robert Morris was shooting themselves out of the game rather than Alabama stopping them defensively finally at any point. There was like a 4-minute stretch, I think, when Robert Morris wasn't able to get a basket to go, and that really helped propel Alabama. They were able to make their free throws towards the very end of the game, which is obviously extremely crucial when it comes to March. But I'm looking at this St. Mary's game because it's something that I had an eye for before the tournament started. And I think that could be a really good game. Maybe St. Mary's doesn't win, but I think that game's got some potential there.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same boat there. I actually had Vanderbilt winning that game against St. Mary's, so I was just a little bit upset with the way Vanderbilt played in the second half, especially towards the end of that game. It felt like once St. Mary's got the lead, Vanderbilt like they had a three to cut it like to a really close game. I can't remember the exact maybe 2 or 3 points, but St. Mary's just felt like in control as soon as they got the lead, and it felt like it was a long time coming. They went on like an extended run where they ended up taking the lead, and then they just never looked back from there. It's really unfortunate because for like Vanderbilt felt like they had that game in the bag, and then they just let it slip away from them, which is a story of March. It always happens where teams go on runs towards the end of the game and then just really close it out, and that's what St. Mary's was able to do. And an Alabama team, where you mentioned it, they struggled a little bit in the Robert Morris game. Nobody really has even heard of what a Robert Morris is, and somehow they ended up dropping 81 points. If there's one thing about this Alabama team, they can let me go two things. They can score the ball. They can also give up a lot of points. And a St. Mary's team that is tough and gritty, if they can kind of just stagnate them a little bit, and they shot really bad against Vanderbilt, like one of their worst shooting performances all season long. If they can improve that a little bit, I think that they can definitely score on Alabama and maybe get the upset there. It's not. I personally would have Alabama in that game, but I don't. There's no reason why St. Mary's can also win that game.
Let's move into number one seed talks. The top seeds: Florida, Auburn, Houston, and Duke. Duke has Cooper Flagg. He was good to go, and they just destroyed Mount St. Mary's. I'm just going to give you a broad question here. Who are you most impressed with? I know it's not exactly very important that they're destroying these number 16 seeds, but what's a team that you were most impressed with and that you might have an eye for the rest of this tournament?
I'll go. Can I go too?
Yeah.
Maybe cover the other two. Duke and Houston. As somebody who we both weren't very high on Houston coming into this, obviously I watched them. I follow the Big 12 a lot, so watching Houston all season long, it's kind of what they do. But especially against a 16 seed, they took care of business. That game was never in doubt. Nobody really had to even turn their TV to flip to the channel to that game, because from the jump, the Houston was all over that game, and just it was impressive to watch. Obviously, they're going against 16 seeds, so things like that do happen. But I mean, in a game where Auburn, like previously earlier that day, was kind of struggling a little bit with the 16 seed. Watching Houston completely dominate their game was kind of refreshing to see as a 1 seed. And then Duke, for kind of different reasons, they dominated as well. But Cooper Flagg getting back on the court, and it just looked kind of effortless for that Duke team. Obviously, again, they're playing a 16 seed, so you can't take too much stock into like the next round. The spread for that game was 32.5, and they ended up covering that spread, which is kind of just a little funny. But yeah, that Duke team was just really impressive, and Cooper Flagg. It kind of looked like in warmups he was going to be completely fine, but he looked like the Cooper Flagg we'd been seeing all season, which is more than impressive, because he went down. He was in a wheelchair, so I mean, just being able to see him bounce back so quickly and being able to get ready for the first round. I was suggesting maybe they should hold him out for the first round, maybe hold him out for the first round and then kind of have him work back into a Baylor game. But he looked fine, and I don't see why they would have any issues with Baylor in the next round.
Yeah, Cooper Flagg looked great. I mean, there was talk about him just potentially sitting out the entire tournament, right? They were like, should you risk any sort of injury? Obviously, this wasn't coming from college basketball fans or anybody associated with the Duke program. They were just kind of more so, he never even really entertained that, but still there were people talking about it. And like you said, on a wheelchair. So of course that sprained ankle looked just severe. If you've seen the video, it's just completely awful. So Duke I'm completely like watching what they're doing right now, because I had them getting bounced just because I didn't know if Cooper Flagg was going to be healthy and good. I'm completely wrong about that. So I'll eat the crow. So the two other teams that we didn't mention here for the number 1 overall seeds are Auburn and Florida. You talked about the Houston game being dominant from the jump, and then Duke covering. Florida just mauled Norfolk State. I mean, their passing looks just so unbelievable, so crisp. And it was like 29-7, and there were some players for Norfolk State just getting frustrated. And it was just because simply Florida just plays such a great brand, or they did in this game, of team basketball, that I'm thinking, I don't even care who comes out of the UConn-Oklahoma game. Like, I'm not even entertaining that right now. I don't really know if any of these number 1 seeds are going to fall victim of the 8-9s. I think, and we've seen it pretty much every single year, and they always say don't pick number 1 seeds for the Final Four. This could be the year. If there's ever a year to break that streak, this really looks like it. And then I'll just mention something about Auburn here with Creighton. I think they were very good against Louisville. And I've been saying this about, I feel like every single team, a ton of respect. They were really good in the first round, but I don't really know if anybody can handle any of these number one seeds. And I think Auburn is in that same boat. I think they're getting a little bit overlooked because some of the other teams just have more stories or Cooper Flag. But Auburn is just such a force that I don't really think that they are going to get bounced either in this next round.
Yeah, going back to the Auburn game, it is a 16 seed, but
yeah,
like the fact that they were able to do what they did when it felt like it was in question, just kind of overcome like a little bit of adversity. I think that bodes well for them, especially for the fact that like there's been so much talk around Auburn, the fact that the way they finished the season, losing three out of their last four. I think that that Auburn team looks really good, and Janai Broome is just, there's no one in college basketball who's really stopping Janai Broome right now.
So we've touched on it a little bit. We talked about the best games coming up in the round of 32 and some potential upset picks. We'll try to just keep them in the same sentence here. I have some games I wanted to highlight, but I want you to go first. What games are you most excited for in the round of 32, and does it contain an upset?
Yeah, it features both. I think it's gonna be a really good game and an upset. I have Arkansas over St. John's. Obviously, I was really low on them in our college basketball March Madness preview, so I'm kind of sticking with that theme. Arkansas showed me a lot during that Kansas game. I feel like Kansas is a really good team, and obviously they have some of the best players in the nation. We're gonna get to Kansas a little bit more. Hunter Dickinson, though, it has been a force. Is the sole reason why I picked Kansas to kind of get to win the Big 12 tournament whenever we did those picks. So obviously Zeke Mayo is a really good player as well. But the fact that Arkansas didn't kind of shy away when they played a really close game against Kansas this past 2 days ago, we'll call it now, and it was just a really good showing from them. I didn't really know all of what to expect, and I think that they can really take it to St. John's. Obviously, St. John's is one of the teams that the two seeds that I was a little bit lower on, and then it feels like St. John's and Houston I was a little bit lower on coming into the tournament, and they both killed. Omaha had no chance in that game. There was the trash cans they put them aside, and within 2 minutes into that game, it was terrible for them. But I think that Arkansas is a completely different beast than Omaha, and if there's going to be a 2-10 matchup that I kind of would like to watch out for, it'd probably be Arkansas, kind of maybe taking it to St. John's a little bit.
I'm really interested in that Arkansas pick because I'm not as low on St. John's as you are, but I will say Arkansas had an inbounds play at the very end of the game where they had to call 2 timeouts. I forget which player it was, but he wasn't running across the baseline like he was able to do, and they had
all over him.
yeah. And just them being able to overcome that moment, and then at the same time just being able to knock down their free throws right after. I thought that did show a lot. Calipari versus Rick Pitino, so hopefully it's some sort of cinema in the round of 32. One thing I wanted to mention was the McNeese versus Purdue. I had Purdue, of course, losing to High Point, and I didn't really have McNeese winning, but I think that this could be a place where we see an upset. I just felt like High Point just didn't have enough to battle how big and physical Purdue was. I think maybe McNeese might be able to do that with what they did to Clemson. I just think that this team could potentially give us an upset, and now we see a 12 seed in the Sweet 16. I think that that's good for March Madness, and I'm taking a look at that game. A couple other games I wanted to throw out to you. Let me know what you think. Drake versus Texas Tech. We'll start with that one.
I really like the way Drake played in the first round, but Texas Tech, I think, is one of those teams that might be a little bit too big and physical for Drake. I would lean. I'm gonna lean Texas Tech. It's a 3-11 matchup, so obviously the lean is obviously going to be with Texas Tech. But I think that Texas Tech gets it done. I don't see Drake making it past them.
I know a lot of people were on Drake, and so that's just one that I'm watching. I don't know if I see an upset there either, but let's go to another matchup. No upsets were involved in this in this region of the bracket. Michigan versus Texas A&M. A lot of people wanted to see Yale versus UC San Diego. They didn't get it. They got Michigan versus Texas A&M. What do you think?
I have Michigan winning this game. I think that Michigan's a really good team. Obviously, they're coming off of just winning the Big Ten championship, and Texas A&M is the whole SEC. It feels like we're starting to see was increasingly more top heavy with teams like Vanderbilt. Texas didn't even make the tournament, at least not the round of 64. So I think that the Texas A&M is a really good team and a really good conference, but I think Michigan can pull it out there.
I side with you as well. I felt like Yale kind of shot them out of the game in a sense too, and I felt like they beat themselves more than Texas A&M beat them. I think this Michigan team is really, really good, especially for a 5 seed. So we'll see how far Michigan goes, but I think they'll win this game against Texas A&M as well. Now, last thing that we're going to cover, we're going to talk about Bill Self. I believe this is the first number one AP top team to be bounced in the first game of the NCAA tournament. Bill Self, obviously big Kansas legend, coach, national champion. Is he on the hot seat right now?
I don't think it's a legitimate hot seat, but I think that Kansas fans are probably going to get a little bit rowdy. I don't think they're going to run him out of town, but I think he has to be on the hot seat a little bit. If you look at the fact that he won the 2021-2022 national championship, it wasn't that long ago, but now when you're not making it out of the round of I have a stat here where it's let's see, since 2017 2018, the Kansas Jayhawks haven't made it out of the first weekend of the tournament, except for the year that they won the national championship. So in 5 out of the last 6 years, they haven't made it out of the first weekend of the tournament, which is really interesting for a Kansas team that, I mean, Kansas is one of the blue bloods of the sport. Like, everyone knows Kansas. Everyone, not everyone loves Kansas, but everyone knows Kansas and everyone respects Kansas. They're just a really good program. And the fact that besides their national championship, they haven't made it out of the round of 32, at least at the very latest, in 5 out of the last 6 years, is just a crazy statistic. And I think that it's got to be partially attributed to coaching. If you look at the way Kansas kind of imploded towards the end of the season, it was less about the coaching and more about the fact that their players were just playing really sloppy. They had a lot of turnovers. They weren't shooting the ball as well as they could have been, especially towards the way they started. They had a rough start to the season too, like kind of immediately dropping from their AP number 1 spot. But even so, they kind of held serve for a little bit there, and then just towards the out-of-conference play or in-conference play towards the end of the season, they kind of just consistently got like worse and worse. And I thought they could maybe recover it. And they had one of the guys that were looking to be the AP National Player of the Year this year, in Hunter Dickinson. He averaged double-double and played really well this season. So I thought that maybe he could carry them to a Big 12 team, a Big 12 tournament, through a Big 12 tournament that was a little bit weaker this year. But they couldn't, and the fact that they underperformed, not even. I think this was also the worst Kansas finish in the regular season in the Big 12 in however long. They finished as the number 6 team in the Big 12. In a Big 12 year, again, that wasn't that strong. So just for a variety of reasons, I think that he's on the hot seat. I don't know that that anything will come of it, and they'll probably just make the tournament again next year and hopefully make it past the round of 32, at least for as it comes to Bill Self. But I think that his seat is definitely warmer than it was maybe 48 hours ago, because Kansas just doesn't lose in the first round. I think I got a stat that Kansas in the 27 years that he's been there has only lost in the first round one other time besides this, and it was 20 years ago, before Kansas was like completely what they are today. So it's just a little bit unfortunate, and the national championship that they had a couple of years back is kind of being overshadowed because, again, I repeated the statistic 2 times already, but 5 out of the last 6 years, they haven't even made it out of the first round of the tournament. So I think that seat is definitely a little bit warm, at least.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the name of the game is to get to the Sweet 16, especially if you're one of these big-time blue blood programs. You got to give some props to Arkansas, too, though, for winning that game as well. With what Calipari's doing over there, it's trying to change like everything about that basketball program. So sometimes you run into a bad draw as well, and maybe that was part of it. I'll give it this. The third ranked transfer portal class for Kansas, as you mentioned, Hunter Dickinson was one of them. That is probably bringing in higher expectations, and Kansas has the highest expectations. So with all the stats that you've mentioned, it feels like the championship run is a lot further in the distance than maybe it should be. And I don't think, and I'm playing both sides here, like maybe it's clouding our judgment. Maybe it really shouldn't be at the same time. But when you are at Kansas, you got to be able to get out of the first round on a more consistent basis and prove that you are a national champion contender, hopefully every other year at the very least, right? Because there are some great coaches who have also fizzled out and went elsewhere that maybe haven't had as much success. So I know Kansas is probably going to be looking, maybe those boosters are going to be like, hey, look, 2 more years, and then maybe we're going to talk. He mentioned this after the game. which I didn't really like after the Arkansas game. He said the previous 2 years we were so beat up as a team at the end. This year we didn't have that excuse. This year our roster was good enough to be competitive, but it probably wasn't the roster it needed to be talked about in a way that the best teams in America are talked about. I am so down for the first part of that quote, where it's just being honest. It's like, hey, look, last couple of years we have been banged up. I'm going to recognize that. But this year, man, no excuses. And then he proceeds to say that the expectations were a little bit too high. I'm not trying to pick apart his words, especially immediately after a loss, but that just felt like it could have went. The second part of that just could have been left unsaid. And that's where I think he could end up getting caught with the expectations, with the, maybe it is too high. I think he's just got to lay low. Just don't mention it right now, because he definitely could be on the hot seat in a couple of years if this trend continues.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like it's almost reminiscent of the other side of that, where you mentioned Arkansas and Coach Cal at Kentucky. Like, it feels like a team where they're consistently underperforming, and like, not saying that he's going to go anywhere else. I think he might even just retire after his time at Kansas, but it feels like a similar scenario where Kentucky fans started to get kind of tired of the fact that Kentucky was getting bounced way too early. And I just think it's also because of the fact that all the expectations that come with Kansas basketball, the fact that in 6 of the 8, in 6 of the 8 years before that, the little run that they're on right now where they're not making out the first round, they're going to, let's count it off here. They lost in the Sweet 16, and then lost in the Elite Eight, lost in the Final Four, lost in the second round, won the national championship. So in the years prior to this little stretch where they haven't been out of the first and out of the second round, they have really high expectations. They're losing the Final Four, losing the Elite Eight, losing a lot later in the tournament, or winning a national championship. So it's a little bit disappointing to see for such a storied program, for someone who's not too high or too low on Kansas either way. It's just a little bit unfortunate, and the questions definitely need to be starting to get asked if they can't make it out of the second round in 5 out of the last 6 years.
Well, I think that does it for the March Madness second special, if you want to call it that, after the round of 64 recap. This has been the Big Little Podcast. I am your host, Patrick Previty. That is Andrew Greig. And as always, we'll see you next time.